Uh, in session 4, we're talking about demand-side synergies. These are synergies based on buyer behavior and how that creates more or less value through combinations of offerings. I will distinguish this from resource-based synergies, such as the 4C synergies, in that this is specifically about how value is realized based on buyer behavior. 4C synergies may actually create these demand-side synergies, and in that case, both of those would be existing at the same time. And I will get into more detail on that in this next slide. This is a summary of demand-side synergies. Often these synergies do involve dissimilar resources. So customization and connection synergies are especially likely to occur with this. For the customization synergies, high modification of resources is involved. You may remember discussing the this resource synergy previously, that engineered complementarity is a phrase I like to use when describing this. Not all engineered complementarity is going to be a demand-side synergy. For example, when parts manufacturers are located close to product assemblers, that lowers transaction costs between them and transportation costs. So that's engineering complementarity, so that they can work better together, but that is not a demand-side synergy. However, when demand-side synergies are created with electronics products, for example, Apple's iPhone and the Beats headphones, that would be an example of engineered complementarity where they've been modified to work better together, and value is only realized when you use both of those at the same time. So if you're using Beats headphones without the Apple product, you're not really realizing any value from that engineered complementarity. Similarly, if you're using the iPhone, but not any of their special headphones designed to create these complementarities, then you're realizing no value from that complementarity. You often see this customization in suites of products or technology ecosystems. For example, you can buy many different products from Adobe, and each of those has been designed so that the user interface is similar, which can make it easier to switch from using one program to another, or if you're already familiar with using one, the learning curve to adopt a second one is much faster. Another dissimilar resource synergy with low modification is the connection synergy, and this also creates customer-specific synergies. These examples can be very mundane, thinking about the combination of a gas station and a convenience store. You see these quite often in many states, and essentially the value being created there is for those customers that are stopping to buy gas. If they're interested in buying other products at the same time, it's much easier for them to just quickly step into the store and make those purchases rather than making an additional stop somewhere else, like a grocery store. So even when prices are a little higher in the convenience store, customers are often willing to do this because of the utility they receive from that one-stop shopping. Another common example of this, which many of you may experience once you begin your jobs, or maybe you've realized this already, is the co-located airports and hotels and conference centers. So that also increases customers' willingness to pay, typically when those customers are businesses and doing business meetings. By using the hotel that's co-located at an airport, they can bring everybody together for a face-to-face meeting, but don't incur the added cost of transportation into the city or things like that. Specifically with these customer-specific synergies, they're based on the purchase of multiple products by one customer. We will also be discussing some, synergies that involve multiple customers or multiple customer types. Those can involve asymmetric utility that involves a two-sided network where you're realizing simultaneous utility, and we'll go into much more detail on what these terms mean on the later slides. But that would be an example of demand-side synergies being created. Direct network effects can also fall into this category of a demand-side value proposition. So for example, the more people that use Google Docs, the more valuable that technology becomes, because working together and coordinating activities becomes easier. That would be a direct network effect, and is not really the focus of this course, which is more based on corporate strategy and the boundaries of activities between firms or within firms. So these synergies are realized based on customer behavior. They can exist in multiple types. One is a customer-specific cost synergy. That would be where the cost is lower to serve one customer two things, as opposed to two different customers one thing each. This often happens through lowering customer acquisition cost and through cross-selling, for example. It can also involve selling or delivering more things at the same time to a given customer. One of my favorite examples of that is Amazon delivery. They have an incentive for you to ship multiple products in a single package because that lowers the cost of shipping per product. That is a cost synergy. They realize that lower cost when they do that, but it does not increase your willingness to pay necessarily. Certainly for most people, it doesn't. So we'll discuss in later slides how that cost synergy requires Amazon to try to change your behavior in order for them to realize more of that synergy. With higher willingness to pay, this is an example where a customer derives greater utility when multiple offerings from the same seller are purchased, and when they're purchased together. That is especially common with ecosystem interoperability or familiarity. So you see this very often with software suites. I mentioned on the previous slide the example of Adobe, which sells many different software products. And once you've used Photoshop to edit photos, if you decide you want to make videos, for example, you can switch to their video editor software, and many of the features will look very similar to those features in Photoshop. And that makes the customer transition a lot easier and makes Adobe Premiere more valuable than a standalone video offering that doesn't have that familiarity of how they function. You also have the interoperability there, where you can take things that have been edited in one of their software products and import it or export it to another product. And they are more valuable together there. You also see that interoperability a lot with Microsoft's products. So you can use an Excel spreadsheet and copy and paste a table from that into Word or PowerPoint, for example. And you can even link those spreadsheets so that you have a figure or a table showing up in your PowerPoint presentation. And every time you change data in the Excel spreadsheet, that can be updated in all of the documents that are linked to that. We will also talk a little bit about how an offering can attract multiple customer types and what that means for value capture. Typically with this, we'll be talking about a multi-sided network. I need to shift down in my notes here. The multi-sided network effects involve customers that of different types that are both using an offering or a platform, maybe a two-sided network, and they may derive utility from the other, but they also may value the platform itself differently, which may require the platform owner to try to attract one type more than the other. One-sided network effects can also fit in here. We'll be talking much less about that in this class. I think I've mentioned already Google Docs is an example of that. A one-sided network effect that also exists between competitors actually is physical locations where many similar offerings are offered. An example of that is car dealerships, which tend to be co-located near other car dealerships. And that allows customers to go from dealer to compare options. You might think that that would decrease the value of a location, having competition nearby, but you can actually attract more customers to that area than independent car dealers located in isolated locations would be able to attract on their own. That's an example of a gravity model in economics. So this brings us to one of the readings for today. Both of the readings were pretty complicated. So if you did not completely understand them on your first reading, that is totally okay. The first reading talked about demand-side synergies with mundane assets. And the authors argue specifically that tanning salons co-located with laundromats are an example of this, in that their co-location adds value. And beyond that, you need common ownership of both in order to maximize the value creation and value capture from that co-location. The primary finding from their paper was that owners who owned both tanning salons and laundromats that were co-located could offer lower prices for tanning and higher prices for laundry, and that this would maximize value creation and capture with this co-location. The logic of that was that women might derive simultaneous utility from being able to do tanning while their laundry is running, and men derive utility from doing their laundry where women are hanging out. I will note that this example comes from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and what works for people there may not work for much more classy Carolina students here. So this does not necessarily apply everywhere, but that's what they found in the data that they were looking at there. The more technical argument here is that there's a two-sided market with asymmetric utilities. So this laundromat is trying to attract both men and women, but women receive more value from the tanning co-located with laundry than men, whereas the men derive more utility from doing laundry where there are women hanging out. And this demand-side synergy needs to be captured by modifying prices in order to maximize value. So because women are, in this example, valuing laundry more than men, or value laundry co-located with tanning more than men, they're able to charge lower prices for the tanning and higher prices for the laundry. For those that are using both, the total price is the same as you would see anywhere else. It's just that one of those happens to be higher and the other happens to be lower than what you might find elsewhere. And then those that are attracted to the location based on who they hope to meet and hang out with would be paying the higher prices for the laundry. So that's how the total revenues increase for the laundromats that are co-located with tanning salons. The reason for arguing that co-ownership is required here in order to create this value is that if these were located right next to each other in a college town, but they were owned by separate owners, the tanning salon owner would have no incentive to offer lower prices for tanning than other locations. Even if that helps create value for the laundromat, they would not receive any value from that. But by being owned by the same owner, they are able to manipulate prices in this way and create value and capture value. And again, that may not be the best example for some of you. I'm not even sure how common laundromats are anymore. I'll just leave it at that. Let's see. So before I move on, I just want to give another example of this demand-side synergy that happens between customers of different types. So another common example is happy hours. Happy hours are used to attract budget-conscious buyers of drinks and appetizers and things like that. Hopefully many of you know what a happy hour is by now. I would be surprised if none of you did. So this happy hour attracts people who are coming in for the lower prices, but people that don't really care about prices are also going to be coming because that's where their friends are hanging out, especially their friends that are more budget conscious. So a way to rely on asymmetric utilities here is to offer narrow specials, whether it's a narrow drink option or a narrow food option. Those budget conscious customers that really care about getting a good deal can get a better deal on that limited selection, whereas all of their friends that are hanging out with them that don't care about price will purchase instead what they're more interested in buying, whether it's their preferred food or drink. So in this way, the budget conscious consumers are subsidized at the expense of those less budget conscious consumers, and more total value is created by offering what both sides want, both the socialization and for those that are budget conscious, their preferred or their cheaper drink or food option. So one thing that can be used to capture value from these synergies are different types of product bundling or non-bundling strategies. First, I want to talk about a pure product strategy. So a pure product strategy is offering a standalone price on each product you sell. And no matter how many different products a customer buys, they would still pay the same price for each. A pure product strategy, when there are cost synergies, would involve lowering the price on everything in hopes of inducing customers to buy more products together. So if a seller offers free shipping, for example, and their costs are lower for those customers that buy multiple things, if they're using a pure product strategy, they would have to lower their prices on everything, hoping that because the prices are so good, more customers will be buying multiple things at the same time. Thus, they'll be able to capture some value from that cost synergy. The problem with using a pure product strategy for a cost synergy is that everybody gets that discount. So it's not just those that would have bought one thing and are now buying multiple things because of the lower prices. Those that are still only buying one thing are getting the lower price, and those that would have bought multiple things anyway are getting that lower price. That makes pure product strategies inefficient for capturing value from cost synergies, or specifically these customer-specific cost synergies. The reading for this went into detail about split marginal customers. Those are just those customers that would be buying one product from one seller and another product from another seller. And if both are trying to capture the cost synergy of shipping two things at once, and they both lower their prices, then you're just facing more price competition for each individual product, and does not really help the businesses that much. So you could also have a pure product synergy or a pure product strategy with willingness to pay synergies. So again, customers can buy whatever they want, one thing or multiple things. In this case, because it's a willingness to pay synergy, the customer only realizes increased value if they're buying both offerings. So for example, I talked about multiple Adobe products working well together. Or perhaps even the better example is Apple's smartphone with the Beats headphones. They're hoping that by modifying the headphones to work better with the smartphone, that more customers will be willing to purchase both. And the reason is that that synergy or that increased value from that specialization is only experienced by the customer if they do buy both. They do not necessarily need to offer any discounts in order to change their behavior. The value of this is that customers self-select into combinations. So if you have two smartphone makers and they each make specialized headphones that work with their smartphones, rather than competing on price, customers will tend towards either one smartphone or the other, and whichever headphones go along with that smartphone to create the most utility. And that allows each side to capture more value without directly competing over price. In fact, firms can also increase prices to try to capture a portion of this synergy. Alternatively, they can keep prices constant. So I think Beats headphones are priced similarly to what they were prior to Apple's acquisition, but they can use that increased synergy or increased willingness to pay in order to capture more market share. So with this, there's less competition for the split marginal customers, and you're not competing on price for lower value customers, those that either would have purchased both anyway, or would still only purchase one despite any discounting you might do. So by not sharing any cost savings with those customers where you're not realizing a new synergy, it's a much more efficient way to capture value. Another option is a mixed bundling strategy. This can be used with either type of demand synergy, but would it be especially useful for cost synergies? With a mixed bundling strategy, you have a standalone price for each offering that you sell, but a discounted price if a customer buys multiple offerings from you. The reason for that, or the rationale, is to share some of the synergy with those customers that are switching to buying two things without sharing any of the synergy value with customers that would still be buying one. So if you're lowering prices on everything, some customers will still purchase only a single product from you, but they'll still get a lower price. Whereas in this case, only those customers that are purchasing multiple products will realize any value from that synergy. So this makes it very efficient for capturing value from cost synergies. It doesn't really add any value for willingness to pay synergies. So if there are products that are more valuable when purchased together for the end user, they will self-select into combinations even without a discount for doing so. If there are both cost synergies and willingness to pay synergies, you may see examples where there could still be a bundle price if that is optimal for the seller. In this paper, it describes mixed bundling strategies as never being rational. That is purely a function of their game theory setup. You should ignore that finding for the purposes of this course and probably for the real world as well. So in their game theory setup, they had two sellers of two products. Each and every customer had to buy one of each product type. So they would either buy two products from one seller, two products from the other, or one from each seller. And there was no other possibility for the customers to do anything else. And both sides had to sell both offerings. So in that case, mixed bundling would never make sense, because if a customer is getting a discount for buying both, then it's essentially a zero-sum proposition for the two sellers on each side, and they don't capture any value from that. You can essentially ignore that for the purposes of this course. An example of a mixed bundling strategy that's very common is what you see with Amazon. So I mentioned earlier that Amazon has a cost synergy when you purchase multiple products from them at the same time, because they can ship those products in a single box. An example of one way they capture value from this is by offering free shipping, provided you meet some threshold of purchases. I think it's $35 right now. So if you buy at least $35 worth of products, you'll get free shipping. That ensures that every order less than that is paying the cost of shipping. And if there are orders above that, then the cost of shipping is spread over more products, or at least a product that's sufficiently expensive that it justifies the cost of shipping. So you get that even if you were going to buy multiple things at the same time anyway, but nobody who's shipping only a single product without relying on that shipping threshold will be paying for their cost of shipping. This gets a little bit more complicated when you think about Prime, but essentially that is the reverse. So if you want to ship individual items without worrying about a minimum purchase order, you are paying a cost for that. Essentially, when Amazon is not realizing the synergy of shipping things together, you're required to pay extra with that flat fee at the beginning of every year. And I'm going to move on. There are also peer bundling strategies that can work with demand synergies of either type. In this case, customers can only buy the bundle. An example of this would be a computer that's sold with an operating system. Technically, you can buy computers without an operating system, but most people buy a computer with an operating system. Similarly, with smartphones, you tend to buy an integrated product that includes the hardware and the operating system. In this case, synergies of either type, whether it's willingness to pay or cost, are always realized. There are no customers that are buying a phone from Apple and putting Android on it, or at least very few customers doing that. And also very few customers that would be buying a Samsung phone and installing the Apple operating system on that. I believe that would technically be illegal as well. So with this case, all synergies are realized, whether or not it's a willingness to pay synergy or a cost synergy. And when this happens, the products essentially become a single product. So most people don't think of a smartphone as being a hardware product and a software product. They're considered separately. Instead, most people think of that as a single offering. And the existence of these synergies essentially shift the supply curve for cost synergies, or shift the demand curve for willingness to pay synergies. And you can kind of think about your previous economics learning with supply and demand curves to think about how that works in the marketplace. So one thing I want to kind of reiterate from the beginning of this is that these demand synergies are distinct from resource synergies, even though resource synergies can be used to create demand synergies. So the resource synergies are about bringing together or sharing resources to lower costs or increase willingness to pay. There may be cases where that's creating demand-side synergies, and the lower cost or increased willingness to pay only happens when a customer buys multiple products. But typically with these resource sharing synergies, the willingness to pay for individual products is also increased, or the cost of delivering each product is lowered. So if you think about the consolidation synergy, for example, if you have two companies and they combine into a single company and reduce the number of HR analysts they have, that synergy lowers costs overall, whether or not the customer is buying one product or multiple products. That would be in contrast to Amazon shipping multiple packages to a single house versus shipping one package with multiple items in it, where that value is only created when the customer consolidates their purchases. These resource synergies, again, are synergies realized through the joint operation of business units. So even if customers only buy a single thing, an example of horizontal diversification, you can still realize resource synergies that can be creating value for you. On the flip side, with what we talked about today, demand-side synergies are based more on customer behavior. So you have a lower cost or increased willingness to pay if one customer buys multiple products from you at the same time. That would be an example of a customer-specific synergy, whether it's lower cost or increased willingness to pay. You can also have lower costs or increased willingness to pay based on multiple customers and the behavior between them, especially if you're talking about a two-sided network where one side is necessary for attracting the other, and perhaps vice versa as well. With something like Uber, it's a two-sided network where drivers need riders and riders need drivers. Pricing strategy can be important for either the customer-specific synergy or those simultaneous utility synergies. And I think that is it for this. If you have questions, I know that this is a lot of information pretty quickly. Definitely feel free to post those questions on Canvas. We will also have a Q&A time in session 4 where you can ask your questions there, and you can try to answer as many as possible for the entire class. Thank you very much.